Dr. Malone, here we are, Monday, April the 6th. Is that right? And we had a full day here at the firm. I started off with a couple of appointment this morning, and then a virtual hearing in Santa Rosa County this afternoon. I'm sorry, at 10 o'clock. I guess it was this particular judge's first hearing via Zoom. So, but we were able to knock it off without any problems, and which is good. Business continues here. We also were able to help a couple of new clients today get signed up and represented from their car wrecks, which was nice to do without having to go somewhere and do it. They could do it from their home. So virtually, we did all the documents online. The weekend didn't necessarily have any breaking news for us locally, so I didn't see it was important enough to bother you or anybody on Facebook, but I felt like we needed to give everybody an update from a medical perspective as to where we stand locally and what your thoughts are on the state of the information concerning the coronavirus.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So as far as the numbers are concerned, most recent numbers that were released a short bit ago for Escambia County have diagnosed cases locally 141. A week ago at this time, we were at 88. And then as of Friday night, we were at 118. So it's still a pretty steady uptick, both in the test results being positive as well as the amount of tests. So when I say that, our percentage of positive tests is still floating between 7 and 8.5%, depending on the day, and not a whole lot of change there. So I guess steady is better than steep increases, and ideally we'd start to see maybe a slowdown, but you want that slowdown to go along with the slowdown in the tests as well. You don't want it to be a slowdown because there's some other just math error, I guess. The social scoring that we talked about last week, it has the state of Florida, actually has as a C-, the state of Florida as a C, and then Escambia County as a D, up from a D- on Friday night.
A D or B?
D as in dog.
Oh.
So not a whole lot of improvement. And again, this is a little bit of a lag on this, so I'd like to see what happens after. Hopefully people obeyed over the weekend. I know just from my point of view, wasn't a whole lot going out. I guess I joked and said I drove the car yesterday on a Sunday, and that was the first time I've driven a car since last Sunday.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a weird feeling. So to get into the other granular details, they're not publishing this data as frequently, at least I've not been able to find it, but within Escambia County, there is now some city numbers that are being released. Of the 141, 100 of them are in the city limits of Pensacola, 12 are in Gulf Breeze, which I guess that's probably the Santa Rosa numbers, I would imagine, and then Pensacola Beach has got 1, and they have a breakdown that's available in the paper that they released this afternoon, if anybody's interested. The things that caught my attention over the weekend that I really think that people should be paying attention to, and we can explain a little bit, is, and you touched on it last week, was the whole idea of, should I wear a mask or not? CDC, I guess came out and said, yeah, we recommend wearing a mask. And on its face, it looks like, oh, they're backtracking, for whatever reason. But if you read the pamphlet, we'll share this on a link tonight. It's actually worded specifically, and people don't get to that point. They see the headline of, oh, I got to be wearing a mask now. And it's meant for, they're recommending even healthy people who aren't sick or aren't symptomatic to wear a mask when you're in a setting where you are unable to adequately to keep that social distance. So if it's on your part that you're unable to do it, or you don't trust the people around you, it's kind of like being on the road driving. You never trust the other people behind the wheels, right? Same thing. You don't know if this person's going to walk right in front of you and sneeze, that kind of stuff. So where you can't ensure your own social distance, they advise wearing a mask for much of the reasons that you'd mentioned last week, where these aerosols or these droplets can linger for up to 3 hours, and then that's just in the air. So they are recommending that, and we've put together, I got the one pamphlet they put out. It shows you how you can do homemade versions of these. And even if it's a a double layer like cotton t-shirt material that you're putting up over your mouth, so long as you take it off and don't contaminate yourself by having it run against your face or your hands and then not wash your hands. So they want you to launder that then pretty quickly thereafter. So the take home message is walking out your front door does not mean you have a mask on. It depends where you go from there is what they're recommending. So I know you're in the office and there's, I guess, at most 2 people in the office. I wouldn't worry about it in that setting, but because you have a secure area. But the moment that the general public is coming around, then I'd be worried, you know. So hopefully
they can't come in the door. So we have a buzzer, and usually the buzzer just is something you do right before you come in. Now the buzzer is, what's your purpose? We talk to them we have a video, little doorbell thing here. And you can actually talk back and forth to the people at the door, and we find out, all right, what's your business? You know, can you leave it there? That kind of thing. If we don't get the door unless it's absolutely necessary. So, okay, so that's the face mask thing. The other thing I heard about the face mask was, and I thought the Surgeon General did a good job. He demonstrated how to make one at your house. I thought that was important and helpful. They also pointed out that it keeps your droplets in, you know, so you don't spray everywhere, which is important. And, you know, the concern, I guess, for a lot of the folks in DC was maybe we don't want to talk about this because it's going to encourage people to go out. In other words, maybe they think if they put this mask on, they can go and do things. And so what do you say about that?
I say that you shouldn't think that way. I think you're right that people think like, oh, like, you know, I have a force field now and I can, you know, go run about my normally errands. They're saying still adhere to any of the limitations in your jurisdiction, your locale of what you're able to do based upon your state. And if you have to go to the store for one of those mandatory kind of errands they're talking about, you should wear a mask like this is what they're advising. But again, keep in mind that really these things should be single use. If you run one set of errands, you should come home and wash it. You shouldn't just set it on the counter and then say, I'm going to take it back out when I go back out to the store in a handful of days, or anybody else in the house, you know, someone else touches it or moves it. So like you mentioned, the person wearing it could have contaminated the inside of the mask, or the outside of the mask could have walked through any of those aerosol mists or droplets like you've mentioned. So right. I'd say use it once and wash it.
Where do you fall? Over the weekend, there was this big controversy. Hydroxychloroquine, I think is the name of the drug, but Trump was talking about how effective he thinks it is as personal opinion. And of course, the scientists and the doctors were saying, hold on just a minute, we don't know yet. They're also talking about Z-Pak, and I can't tell if they're talking about Z-Pak by itself or Z-Pak with hydroxychloroquine as a combination type deal. What if somebody, is it the latter? Is it both?
Yes. Yes, the combination.
Okay. And he talks about he secured 28 million doses of this hydroxychloroquine, and that's that. I can't really tell what's going on, but in some of the things that are being said. But what exactly are you doing? And if a patient asks you right now, should they get hydroxychloroquine from their general practitioner just in a Z-Pak just to have at the house? And if they have it at the house and they're in the high risk group, should they go ahead and start taking it? Obviously, if they have lupus and they're already taking hydroxychloroquine, I don't think lupus are taking the Z-Pak, but if they're already taking hydroxychloroquine, you know, and they have somebody in their family that wants to start it because of this virus, what are you telling people in that regard? Because this is now a thing. Yeah. Whether we like it or not, since it's been such a big deal to the president, I think it's now a thing.
Yeah, I agree. And so the important thing is that any of the data that's out there is indeed limited. However, it's also not focused on the prophylactic use, which is what you mentioned, like, hey, like keep one on hand. So like if you have a sneeze, you take it just in case it is. So
like Tamiflu.
Indication. Yeah. So I was thinking about that when you were phrasing your question, and that's the closest thing I can think of is Tamiflu is a great drug, but here's the thing: if you show up 4 days into your illness, the drug is not effective. So an astute physician would say, it's not worth treating you with this drug. There are a potential for some side effects. So you're going to weather this storm just fine. You're doing well. So you don't need to be on the Tamiflu. So that is what I think this similar mindset should be for any treatments that come out. If you've got minimal symptoms and you've already been through this for a week, I think you're there.
What about the statement, what do you have to lose?
Well, and I agree with that in the setting of someone who's admitted to the hospital who's acutely ill like that. If you're just going home to do your self-isolation and symptom control, I think, yeah, you do have something to lose, because if you do have if you're one of the 1 in whatever 1,000 people that you have a side effect, then you have an avoidable reason that puts you back in the hospital.
Okay, but here's my question. There are people that have COPD, asthma, maybe they're in a high risk group for other reasons, they're older, and they're concerned about it and they have access to this medication. If there's really no downside, and you listen to what the president says, I know he's not a doctor, but he says, what do you have to lose? And if you're in a high risk group, what's the downside then? And he keeps saying the FDA has approved it, blah, blah, blah. The FDA has approved it for a certain use, but not for this particular use. I think he's suggesting, so use it off label, and you only should do that if a doctor's orchestrating that. But he's basically saying, look, we don't have time to worry about that. If you're in a high risk group and, there's a chance this might work, what's the worst that could happen to you?
Yeah.
A heart rhythm abnormality.
Well, that or the antibiotics themselves, you can get like antibiotic-associated colitis, and that can end up being pretty devastating as well. So there are some things beyond just the chloroquine, but it's also important to note that, and I think I saw this, I can't cite it off the top of my head, but I know I read it, that there are people showing up to the hospital who have lupus, who take this drug, who are being diagnosed with the virus.
Oh. So why can't we get some more information in real time on how this is working on the patients? Like, it seems like to me, since this is an expedited issue and we need to know what's going on in real time, why is there not, whoever's doing the study, I think they're doing it in Washington and Boston and some other place, why can't we know in real time how effective these patients are the treatments are going along with these patients, so that we can know what to do? Like, do they wait till the very end, till they release the patient before they release anything?
It's probably that. So it's not like they take one dose of it. It's generally they're taking a course of it. So it's a 7-day course. So you got to take a 7-day course and then see how they tolerate it. But then the other thing is, these drugs aren't working on the real bad pneumonias you're hearing about. That's because of the inflammatory changes within the lung. And so the idea is, my inflammatory change may be different than yours, independent of what drugs we're on. So that's why they're trying to come up with the other modalities with the steroids that we mentioned last week, where, hey, adding steroids to this is certainly something we need to consider in certain populations. So I don't have a good answer as to why it's not fast, other than it's so unpredictable, especially every patient's presentation. So.
Well, okay. And then the other thing that concerns me, especially with this Boris Johnson stuff that came out this afternoon, I heard a figure that if you get put on a vent, there's only a 20% chance that you're going to come off the vent. Is that a correct?
That's probably not far from the truth. However, let me add to that it tends to be true in any respiratory failure, and for eons it's been like that. So the easiest thing to do is intubate someone. The most difficult thing to do is to get them off the vent. So anybody can intubate a patient, but managing them and getting them off of it, no matter why they ended up on it, is more tenuous. So I think that the number is not that low, 20% for like heart failure or COPD, but for this, yeah, it is. So I believe it. So if you get put on a ventilator, and I'll also add that there's different levels of being ventilated. So to have the tube go down your throat where you're in a coma, that's pretty much the most extreme, with the exception of putting someone on a bypass machine, like a cardiopulmonary bypass, like they do for open heart surgery. But then there's other levels, what they call non-invasive mask ventilation, or BiPAP. and it's just literally a mask that gets strapped to your head, and it pushes air in and sucks air out, and you can take it on and off intermittently through the day. So someone can sit up in bed without it on, and they just need it at night. If you can temporize things with the non-invasive means for these people, that's a whole lot easier to manage, because you're not complicating things with, am I going to be able to get them off the vent because they get too weak, or other parts of their body start giving out, and they don't have enough strength to breathe on their own after so many days. They're just so dependent upon the vent. You really don't want that.
Okay. What other things do you have for our audience today?
I had a interesting, and I'll share this screen here real quick if that's all right with you. And this is you had mentioned it a couple of times last week about, hey, there's these other hotspots and you were worried about them, right? So
Yep.
the University of Chicago put out a map that shows the other hotspots in the country. So what else do you see on there?
Well,
New
I can't see
Orleans?
anything. I can't see anything right this second. I don't know if the audience can see the map. Is the map?
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's
So,
like I see us to the side, and then I see a big black screen. But I did see a graph when you first turned it on. Like the top part of that showed up.
Oh, okay.
And then the little graph that went straight up, I saw that. But we didn't see the map of the United States. There you go.
Okay. Well, we'll share it, but point being is that New Orleans, specifically that part of Louisiana, is bright red compared to a lot of the other parts of the country, and so it's really per capita, the most ill people are actually going to be coming from there, is what they're expecting, as opposed to what you see in the news right now is New York City, New York City, New York City. And they don't have a real great explanation as to why right now. However, they think underlying comorbid conditions such as obesity and diabetes and hypertension and heart disease will likely be part of that.
Mardi Gras.
So that's and that's going back to that. They're saying, was this here before we originally thought, with the initial case in Washington State? Was it around for the Super Bowl? Was it around for Mardi Gras? And you and I know Mardi Gras is not one day. Mardi Gras is a season.
Right.
And so parades go on in New Orleans for weeks. So for those who've never been or not part of that, not part of this region, it's a months-long endeavor. So anyhow, so we'll share that hotspot map, but it just brings to light what you had mentioned multiple times as far as the New Orleans, and I think you're going to end up being spot on as far as being just as concerned with that epicenter as well as New York City. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, just a couple of interesting things, was the antibody testing, and that came up over the weekend. I actually had that on our agenda on Friday, and we ended up talking about other stuff, so I said I'm going to save it. And we have a informational sheet to share with people, and I can't wait personally for the antibody test to make it to our area. I don't know that we're going to be right on the top of the list in the state of Florida, because there's other hotspots within Florida, but the antibody test is, I think, so there's two antibodies it tests for, IgM and IgG. Our body makes one before it makes the other, so you can actually tell how recently they were infected as well, depending on the spike with each one. If you get a positive spike, which you want, and that means that you were exposed and didn't even know it and had a mild illness, and now you're immune. And then the other thing is, it is if in the setting where we had a vaccine, you would have an antibody to it. So I had the flu shot this past, I guess, fall now. And so if you tested my blood for the antibody for the influenza, I would have it because I got the vaccine in October. So right now, we're just going to be seeing antibodies, hopefully, in people's blood, and they can either be used for the serum that we talked about for treating acutely ill people. And it also allows these people to understand that they're not a vector anymore. That's not to say that they can't touch a filthy surface and have some filth on their hand and then transfer somewhere else that someone else then touches. So they can still be a vector, but they're not shedding virus themselves.
Right.
So that's important to know. So then if you have, let's say, one person in your family or one person in your workplace who ends up getting the antibody, then think about that. Like, that's the person that runs your errands. Like you all of a sudden are going to be the one who goes out and does this stuff because you can. So I think that'll allow for hopefully some loosening on some of the constraints, but it's going to be I think they're going to continue to learn how best to use this test and get it into the right hotspots. So we'll share that information as well. It explains a little bit in very basic terms as to what we're doing with the antibody test. And it's also going to be one of those things where I don't think that you can just go like get it. We talked about that at the start of this whole thing. Like, why can't I just get tested? I think there's going to be probably some criteria on, when did you think you had the illness? Did you have an exposure? What's your timeline? So that they're not just doing things so people can like have it on the resume, like, hey, I got, look at me.
Or their social media.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think it's going to be like that, at least at the outset. So I do expect that it's probably going to be controlled as to who's getting it. And I know just in our own chat, but looking back, like my wife and I both forensic analysis in February, and we were both sick, and it was like a different kind of sickness than we've ever had. And I'm like, we probably should be getting tested, because I'd be willing to donate plasma if the opportunity was there, and then I'd also be willing to be the one to say, I can go out now. Like, let me go do the errands.
Come to the office.
Yeah, I'll come to work. I'll be the, I'll answer the little.
You'll be the Michelle, because Michelle's gonna be sick at some point.
Yeah. So I think that that's something that you're going to hear more and more about. So there's one company that the FDA approved late last week, and so they're rolling out today. And then there are other companies that are making this. It's just the FDA hadn't approved them yet. And in fact, there's stories of I think somewhere in Colorado where there was a company that was running some tests just on like a local like city that was like, yeah, you can test our citizens. So to use it as you're not acutely infected, and by the way, you had the infection, you got the antibody, is all they can deliver. They can't say you're not infected, because they're not testing for that. They're just testing for the antibody. So I think that'll be interesting. And then lastly, the other thing that I saw, and it was in our local news actually. Channel 3 had it with Dr. Jennifer Murray up at the eye center, up at the medical center. Common sense things, people. The contacts, she was saying, is really, it's another excuse for you to have to touch your face. So they're saying eyeglasses is probably the way to go if you have an option right now, so that you're not putting your finger into your eyeball. Not that the contact has got an infection on it, but it's, again, trying to limit the amount of times you're touching your face. So common sense stuff, and that kind of goes along with, if you're going to wear the mask, make sure you use common sense in putting it on and taking it off. So that's kind of what I had. We can share some of these links with people. I don't know if there's any other questions or things that have popped up that you had wanted to discuss.
No, but I was going to ask you a question about the EAR reporters that were, I saw something on the news that said two of their staff were diagnosed with a virus, and so they're now going to do all their newscasts from Mobile or something, I think, or they're going to.
Yeah, the newsroom shut down, basically.
Wow. Were they on-air personalities that had the virus, or did they say?
Everything, it wasn't specified in any of the reports I saw, or the statement from the channel. It just said that, and it was like the first thing I read this morning when I woke up is that their newsroom was shut down, and I think Sue Strawn was out front giving some sort of an address, but nothing specific there. But I can't imagine having to do. I mean, there's got to be some sort of machinery. Like we're fortunate because we were able to move everything out of the firm somewhat feasibly, get into some of these online modules and all that for signing documents and all that. There's not a whole lot of that you can do if you have to actually broadcast through a tower, I can't imagine. But
well, the national networks, the national cable networks seem to be doing it fine from their houses.
But someone's got to go in though.
Somebody's got to run the show. Yeah, back end, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they're doing. They're going to be doing that in Mobile, and everybody's going to be wherever in Pensacola somewhere. But they're frontline people too. I mean, if you're in the media, you got to be up in people's faces asking them questions, and if you're not, taking precautions, and not a lot of people were doing that 2 weeks ago or a week ago or whatever. So they're right there. They're at the hospitals asking questions, and they've been downtown pretty much every day on Palafox right here asking questions. So anyway, I hope they're okay, and I hope they're doing well, and I hope they get better fast. All right. We'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Hopefully everybody will start feeling better. And there's a couple of people in the media, and the Prime Minister of Britain is in intensive care, evidently. I wish him the best. And we will see you guys back. Try to stay away from everybody and keep your hands clean. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Malone.